you. So there it is. I'd like to call to order the Policy and Education Subcommittee meeting for Wednesday, October 14th. Dr. Hackett, I will turn it to you to discuss our reopening.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. So tonight we thought it would be a good idea to get some people who are actually doing this work to get a perspective from them about what a day in the life looks like. What have some of the successes been? What are some of the challenges? Have a conversation about how can we maybe get a little better at what we're doing, and then kind of a broader discussion about kind of where we're headed. But I think most importantly, to be able to hear from administrators and teachers, teachers around planning, from administrators around the day-to-day challenges that they face, so that we can all hear it firsthand. I think that's the voice that, to this point, we've really not been able to get to, because obviously we're only 3.5 weeks in. But now that we've lived it a little bit, I think it's a good opportunity for us to hear from some people. So what I'd like to do is, first of all, let you know who's on the line with us. We have Rebecca Kidwell from Technology, Stacey Soto from Flaherty, Michelle Gaffney from Flaherty, Tara Boening from Liberty, and Damon Rainie and Justin Taylor from South. So what I just kind of,
Claire Brady.
And Claire Brady's on the line, but she is cooking supper right now, so not to embarrass it, but so she can hop in any time, certainly, to further discussion. But so I thought the easiest thing to do would be to start with our elementary people. So if Stacey, Michelle, Tara could unmute, and maybe Stacey, you can start us off with just a kind of a description of how things have gone, and take it from there.
Sure. Well, thanks for having us, because we like to have our voices heard and to brag about what's been going on, because I have to say it's going better than I ever could have anticipated. And as far as teachers, as far as children, the number one thing we learned is children are flexible and resilient, and they're all keeping their masks on, they're keeping their 6 feet apart. They're doing such a great job following the directions. It's just been better than ever and I could ever anticipate. What really has worked, the challenges really were the anticipation of it coming. And then once we got the kids in front of us, and I think Michelle and Tara would agree, once the kids came in front of us, everything kind of just fell back into place, because that's what we do. We work with kids. So the best things that worked were our arrival. We all painted dots around or got some policy in place about how arrival and dismissal would go. I can't lie, I lost some sleep about the rain we had on Tuesday, but we survived and we all got in, and arrival and dismissal happened, and we have some ideas to go on from weather, because the weather can be a big obstacle, but it worked. And we're utilizing outside time for mass breaks, and we're utilizing our supervisory paras who usually do lunch and recess to monitor mass breaks outside if possible. And then on Tuesday, we all utilize a larger space where they could all still remain 6 feet apart and have their snack and their mass break. So it's been really working really well with that. And I have to tip my hats off to every single teacher who has learned so much technology, who is working round the clock. They don't know how to turn it off. They're their own worst enemies. But they're working round the clock to make sure everyone has access. And our math and reading specialists have really stepped up and have taken on a huge chunk of the remote time. So our students are getting live in-person, well, not live, remote teaching, synchronous, with people that really know the topic and know the subject, and are great teachers and know all the kids. So that's really working well, as well as all the times that they do have together in the afternoons for social studies and science, and on Wednesdays as a whole class. That's the only times they have all together. And it's really working out really, really great. I really feel like we're giving a robust curriculum, both in person and remote. And I'm really proud of all the staff and all that they're doing. And I just want one more plug is for IITs. They've been working so hard to help parents and kids and teachers with any troubleshooting of technology. And so that was a great idea by Rebecca to not have them take classes right away, because they've been so needed. And it's calming down now because everyone's kind of getting their feet wet. But I feel like we're in a really good groove, and I'm really proud of the staff.
Thanks, Stacey. We keep Stacey around for just the positive things. She lifts our spirits. Nothing's ever wrong when Stacey's talking, so it's refreshing, but I'm sure some things might come up as we continue the discussion. Michelle, do you want to just talk about a day in the life, and I think particularly just help us understand how you plan and the differences in your planning and both the challenges and what you've learned?
Sure, I would be happy to. So, agreeing with Stacey, it is really wonderful to see the kids live and in person and in school again. That's probably been the best part for every teacher, in our building and that I've talked to, is that is the best thing, to see the kids live again. They're so happy to be in person. They're sad when it's time to go home. This week especially, cohort A was very sad that they only had one in-person day. They couldn't even believe it, that they weren't coming back 2 days in a row. So a day in the life in an elementary teacher right now starts with, our regular, we all get to school well before the school day starts to make sure that we're set up and ready to go. Technology is running. Most of us are running 2 computers at our desk right now. So we have a laptop and our desktop running simultaneously so that we can see all the students on Meet and be able to present our screen and any materials that need to be presented and shared with the group. We do start each morning at 8:30 with a morning meeting with our cohort that is home. So we get set up, get our technology on, and we do start. It's usually about 15 to 20 minutes with a morning meet in the morning with the kiddos who are home. So it is nice. It's a small group. It's usually 8 to 10 kids, depending on what your class size is. The kids really look forward to that. We have to usually push them off at 8:45, 8:50, that they do have to go and they have to leave the meeting. Some teachers do report out that can be a little challenging because the kids don't want to get off. And especially as they get older, or some of the older grades, I've been hearing from, those teachers that the kids kind of are being a little pushy about wanting to be the last one on and not getting off right away. So we've been working out some kinks with that to make sure that the kiddos leave the meeting so we can leave the meeting. Then literally we walk to the door and open the door and your other cohort is waiting at the door for you. So it is within seconds, you're turning from remote teacher to live teacher. Then the kiddos are there from 8:50 to 12:10. We are on the move. We are making the most of every single second of that time because it really is short. We are teaching reading and writing and math during that time. So we're really condensing. It's, when you think about pre-COVID, we had 5 days of phonics instruction, 5 days of vocabulary instruction, story. So we're cramming it all into 2 days. Not cramming it all in, but we're trying to get as much face-to-face live instruction in 2 days. So that has its challenges in planning and prioritizing what we should be teaching. That varies by grade level. Of course, being first and second grade, we're really focusing on the phonics and building some fluency, basic math skills. So they are working the whole time, that they go right up until that 12:10 when we are taking them out the door. So the kids leave and we come back and we all eat in our rooms. Nobody's congregating in any common spaces. So we're eating in our rooms, copying, planning. Some girls go home because the Wi-Fi doesn't always work in all the spaces, in all the rooms. So some of the girls do have to go home in the afternoon because they don't have connection in their rooms. And IT is working really hard. I don't know what it's like in other buildings, but they're there almost every day trying to resolve that problem so that we all can stay and all have connection in each room. But we're not there yet, power of yet. And some of the afternoons after we eat, we have some co-planning with the reading and math specialists that support our classes or that teach our classes on the remote days. And some of the days we just meet as a grade level and planning, but it's basically we're working every second of that time before we go back on live at 1:30. And well, I guess our grade level is using a few minutes, 1:30 to 1:45 for some office hours. If kiddos have questions, they need to talk to us about anything. And then we usually start science and social studies 1:45-ish. And we're teaching live to the whole class, or synchronous instruction to the whole class. So it is great. You get to see your class as a whole in the afternoon. The kids are really doing a great job at being able to get on and off meets. We're learning new things like how to do Jamboards, Google Forms, flip grids. They're writing in text boxes. There's definitely a few little, technical things as younger kids are learning how to use these tools, but we're introducing them to a lot of technology that we probably thought they would never be able to do, but they're doing it. Some needing a little bit more support than others. Then we wrap up our day with an end of day meeting. So for the most part, I think most elementary teachers, and I don't know about all the other buildings, but I think most of us are pretty much live with our class for that whole time from 1:30 to 2:45, maybe with some breaks where kids and classes get off, do something independent, and then come back on. And I can speak for Flaherty, when the day ends, when the kids leave the meets, most people are still staying, working, if they're there in the building. On the days we do have to go home, I can speak, and I'm sure it's probably the same all around. Teachers and teams are continuing to work. Like Stacey said, we don't know how to shut it off. We're continuing to work at night, whether calling the other people on your team, continuing Google Meets, working independently. I think everybody's doing it because we love what we do and we care about it. We want to be good at it. We want this to be the best for the kids. But I can speak for I know everybody in my building, and I could probably say that every building, that we are working harder than we've ever worked, ever. We do all have to tell ourselves to shut it down sometimes, a lot of the times, because some of us are putting in way too many hours, making videos of ourselves teaching, making screencastifys, developing new digital lessons, slides, recording ourselves so that students can have flip grids that they can respond to. The teachers are working like crazy. Some of the great things that we're seeing is the afternoon, well, of course in person. The afternoon we have our whole class. I know it's remote, but we are synchronous and we do have our whole class. We're able to keep 2 days of science instruction and 2 days of social studies instruction because we do have the whole class asynchronous. If I know with, talks about moving to a full day model, those are things that are keeping myself and other teachers awake, and how we're going to fit that in, because I don't think I know we won't be able to have the whole class have 2 days of science instruction and 2 days of social studies instruction, because that time that we have is only about 40 minutes or so for actual. So that's a concern for us, as from the teacher end, on how we'd be able to fit it in. And that then our younger kids will be doing more asynchronous assignments in those subject areas rather than getting live instruction from us. At the elementary level on Wednesdays, the teachers are teaching synchronously in and out throughout the day. I think the minimum was 75 minutes. I think if you polled the elementary teachers, it's way more than that. My typical day on a Wednesday, and everybody on my team, we get on for our morning meeting, we move right into math. It's usually about 15-20 minutes together, synchronous. They go off and do some independent activities. They come back on in about 20 minutes. They're kind of on and off throughout the day. We're trying to give them more, leave the meet, do something off computer, and then come back and join us. And they're doing great at going on and off of the meet when it's with the classroom teacher, because the link is right there in Google Classroom. When it's not the classroom teacher and they have to log into a Meet, the younger kids have had a few little difficulties sometimes just knowing the code, knowing how to put it in, but with more practice and some parent support, they're making it to most of their Meets now. And lastly, I think the other great thing is that, like Stacey said, our math and reading specialists are continuing instruction on the remote days for the cohorts when they're home. So elementary students get, 1 day of, so if it's the Thursday, Friday, 1 day live instruction with math, and then the second day would be a asynchronous assignment with math, and then it flip-flops. They also are getting synchronous instruction from SEL, social emotional learning lessons, and the specialists art, PE, music, and then they see us as the teachers in the afternoon for either science or social studies. So overall, I feel like elementary is getting a lot of synchronous time. What we have that's in place is working really well right now. I feel like we've just reached the point where we've kind of worked out the kinks. And so it's definitely a big worry, I have to say, for the elementary teachers to be throwing in a change to the schedule right now. That's putting a lot of stress, anxiety, and concern on our end on how we're now going to do it, because most of our schedules are probably not going to change significantly. We just got used to it. I think I took up enough time.
No, that was great, Michelle. Thank you. Tara?
Sure. I mean, to echo all of the things that Stacey and Michelle talked about, in terms of opening of schools, I mean, the thing about this year is that we were met with so many things that we really just do. Students arrive to our buildings, we have schedules for specialists and lunch, but because it is the business that we're in, we know what to do from there. Whereas opening the school this year, it made us think about all of the little things that happen during the course of our day that now we need to have a plan for and strategize for, because it would impact us if we didn't have all of those logistics played out. So when we think about one of the things, I was just jotting down a quick list. I mean, we really had to coordinate our arrivals so that we didn't have groups of students in one area. Our dismissal process completely changed. How students use the bathroom in our building had to completely change, because we know it could be a popular spot at times. How we walk in the hallways is something that we had to look at. We wanted to make sure that we had a flow of traffic in all our buildings. And that certainly, I mean, all of that planning, birthday pencils was another thing. Our students were really concerned, how are they going to be able to come to the office and get their birthday pencil on their birthday? And some of them aren't even in the school on their birthday. So with all of that planning that took place prior to the school opening, and I think that that now has translated into all of the planning that's taking place in the teachers' classrooms, is that at that point, the way we saw it was that in order to open up schools and to do it safely, the community was counting on us to have all of these components taken into consideration. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've had a really strong start to the school year, especially at the elementary level, because we've had the time to think about how was this all going to happen as elementary principals. We talked about all of the little nuances of the day, and then that also carried over to the classroom teachers, spending all of this time planning together, collaborating with one another, because their classrooms are a representation of all the time that they've put into all of that planning and preparation as well. And I know that Stacey spoke about her opening, and Michelle gave us a glimpse into the classroom. So I think out of all of those components, you've probably gotten a good understanding of all of logistics and why I think elementary we've had a really great start. So I can't speak more highly about how the kids have come in and how everybody has really taken on to this new model that we've had to adapt to.
Well, thank you, Tara. Great. It's muted. Do you, Madam Chair, do you want to take questions from the committee of the elementary folks now, or do you want to move on to the middle school?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same.
I'm sorry?
I was going to ask the same question. Do we want to ask questions by level, or do we want to hear all the presentations first?
I think I'd like to hear all the presentations first, if that's amenable to the committee. We'll let everybody kind of tell their story, and then ask our questions if that works.
Okay.
Okay, Damon and Justin Taylor, could you guys unmute and take us through?
You bet.
Damon,
Good
Damon, you want to go
evening.
first or you want me to go first?
Why don't you start, Justin?
Okay, I would love to. So I prepared for this meeting by writing a 3-page manifesto, which I planned to read, but Damon told me to throw it away. Coming to you
Now,
live.
to be fair, I just said trim it.
Yeah. So this is my classroom. I'm doing 7th grade ELA for my guest bedroom, so welcome. It's nice over here in Dorchester. I do want to start with one critique, and then I have nothing but positives. And my critique would be that good teaching requires lots and lots and lots of planning, and we were not set up for success at the beginning of the year with the amount of last-minute decisions that were made. We rolled with it. I think we rose and met your expectations, if not exceeded them, but we were not set up for success as teachers at the beginning of the year. We didn't have a working schedule until the 4th day with students. We were literally organizing them on our own. It was chaos. There were tears from adults, from kids. It was a lot. But we're now past the orientation period. I feel like my students know my rules, my procedures. They understand how to access all the resources that are available for them. I feel like we're starting to make some progress on the curriculum, which is great. Very, very apprehensive, but I just feel so positive about it. I have a list of things that I'm calling happy accidents. These are not things that I think anyone planned when they were making the schedule, but they're just really great benefits that I don't think we would have been afforded if we hadn't had this pandemic. The first one is asynchronous Wednesdays. This is the first time in my career when there has been a slotted time in my schedule that I'm allowed to meet with my colleagues. I have 3 meets every Wednesday, about 3 hours of my day, just meeting with colleagues. So I have a meeting with my grade level counterparts. We meet and we talk about the curriculum, all the 7th grade ELA teachers. We're making sure that we're on the same page, that all students, regardless of the mode of instruction, are getting the same thing. I'm also meeting with administration, including principals, vice principals, guidance counselors. Before it was very much they are available, but you have to seek them out. Now I get an hour with Miss Mazzetti at East every week. It's great. We have that hour to process strategies on how to deal with specific kids, how to adjust the curriculum to make sure that everyone is getting access to it. Sometimes we have special guest stars where a special ed teacher will come in, give us a quick presentation on something that worked. It's really nice. And then the other hour is with my team. So the social studies, science, and math teachers that's on my team, where we get to discuss the students that are on our caseload, who's contacted home, what was that experience like, what's working with one kid, what's not working with one kid. Again, that's something that I've never had in my career. I've really felt like I've been an island of a teacher for most of it. So it's really nice to have this experience. Office hours on Wednesday are also just life-changing. Before, you had to sort of ask a kid to come see you during lunch, come see you after school, before school. These were not opportunities that were afforded to each kid. You know, kids have after-school activities. Some kids depend on the bus. Some kids, it's just really unfair to take them away from a lunch period, that kind of situation. So office hours, also just a clutch part of the schedule. We've had a few opportunities to sort of step away from the traditional teaching mode. You know, I think that we are a pretty progressive bunch here in Braintree. We know all the cutting edge techniques and skills and pedagogy when it comes to teaching, but the pandemic has really, and the schedule has asked us to step away what we're comfortable with. Adjusting the curriculum, you know, we always want to dust off our shelves and get rid of those old binders, but this year I'm not teaching in my classroom. I don't have those resources available. It really, every single day I have to adjust my expectations. I have to change worksheets. I have to make them digital, all of that stuff. We're stepping away from homework, which has always been a goal, but this year it's really, really important that we know what our students are capable of. For example, in my class, I use the asynchronous time, their independent time. That's when they work on their reading. Eventually, when we get into it, that's when they'll be doing their writing, their essay work. If they are being given homework, it's usually, finish a classwork assignment that we started in class together. There's only like 5 or 10 minutes left. You're good, you got this. The last 5 minutes of class are preview what's left, ask me if you have any questions, that kind of thing. We're also stepping away from the traditional form of tests and quizzes now that we have all of these tech resources. And we've always known that tests and quizzes aren't necessarily the best way to assess students. But the pandemic, again, is forcing us to change those things and get away from, giving our students the level of test anxiety that they come to school with. Smaller class sizes with the cohort model it's just genius. It's just the best part of the schedule. Having 12 to 15 faces in front of me as opposed to 25, 30, 35. I'm able to check in with each and every student every single class. In a typical classroom, I walk around, I can look over your shoulder, I can troubleshoot really quickly, but I'm able to actually have their work in front of me. I'm able to leave comments and feedback, move on to a student, and I'm able to cycle through everyone 2 or 3 times, which it wasn't possible in a typical classroom. In terms of technology, the one-to-one program is a success, right? Because everyone now has technology. When I first heard about it, I really worried that we would be dragging our feet on that. But everyone has it, and when we do get back to a typical classroom, a typical model, we should have complete success with that program. That being said, this is little, but there's less time spent at the copier, right? We're not ordering as much paper, we're helping the environment, et cetera, et cetera. I think that before all teachers had access to Google Classroom, but now I think there is 100% buy-in. Everyone has that sort of digital space. All students and families know that they have a place to go for materials from their teachers. Whereas before, maybe it was used sparsely, maybe some teachers hadn't bought in yet, that kind of thing. We're using new software platform licenses that we have never had before. ClassLink and Parrot Square are just paramount for communication, things we've never had access to. Literacy Pro, Newsella from Rock Roberts. I don't think he's on this call, but these are genius, wonderful programs that are really going to change what we can teach our children, our students. Attendance, it's now required digitally. Before I just kind of had my checklist and I kept those papers all year, but never really did anything with them. They were never centralized into a database, but now everyone has access. That's a habit I'd like to keep going when we return to a typical schedule, but it's small, but it's something that I wouldn't have done if I hadn't been forced to. And I like that I have that habit now. Some negatives, I'm not in the classroom, but I emailed 20 or so colleagues just to see what everyone else was saying. Everyone is a little worried about what we're going to do with mask breaks once the weather changes. And we're not going to be able to go outside. So that is something it was mentioned over and over again. Class sizes in the remote academy are growing a little bit. We started at 97. Now we're up to 130 in 7th grade. 8th grade has 140. So I know that there are some talks of restructuring as soon as Monday. So I should be losing some kids, but my class sizes are a little bit larger than the in-person classes from what I hear. Everyone is very worried about potential changes, sort of the same thing that happened in late August, where a last-minute decision was sort of made without thinking it through completely. So I think all of my colleagues really want a plan in place and some time to think about it, some ways to give feedback before anything actually changes. And then I think that's it. Thank you.
Hey, Justin, thank you very much. Damon?
Well, tough acts to follow. I think a lot of what Justin talked about sort of captures the experience for the middle school teacher. From a student's perspective, I think it's important to hear a lot of what he's saying in terms of, the small cohort, the fact that we're splitting the cohort creates the small class size. In the first week of school, I had teachers saying to me, it's like teaching at the academy across town, because of the class size that we have. And I think that's only grown. There was some anxiety at the beginning of the year about forming connections with students, getting students, this is in the spring, we were trying to put together learning opportunities with kids that we'd already had 2/3 of the school year with. And so there was some anxiety about starting with a new group of students and how are they going to get to know me as a person and how are they going to get to know, how am I going to get to know them as individuals? And I think teachers have been rewarded to find that the small group size makes that somewhat more accessible, so that even just a few weeks in, we're able to, I think they're feeling like, you know, they haven't really missed too many steps in that way. To Justin's point, that helps with not only supporting kids, but also pushing kids. I think that's one of the pieces with this model was that we got rid of levels at the middle school level. And so there was discussion about how are we best going to support kids. Now we spent the first few weeks, well, first getting to know kids, getting them to know the curriculum. And we're starting to move into the area where teachers have given enough assessments that they've done some, you know, kind of like level assessing to figure out where students are in the process and to identify which gaps need to be closed, but also starting to identify students who maybe can be pushed to challenge themselves more, who can be pushed to think in a different way. At the middle school level, we do a lot of trying to make connections across curriculum. And so, you know, different students who might show an interest or an aptitude in a certain field, that now is the time when you're going to start to see teachers trying to play up on that, which I think is going to increase the pressure a little bit on the students, but hopefully will also kind of increase that sense of engagement. You know, there's sort of the honeymoon period of the first few weeks, and now that we're settling into it, I think that this is going to be a different form of settling in than we've ever had before. Not where we, you know, sort of get into the routine and get into the rut as much as we kind of push ourselves to the next level of making these into realistic, meaningful experiences for the students. The schedule that we've built for kids, I'll use the in-person schedule to just sort of capture it, because I know there was some discussion about how much synchronous learning is happening. So for a middle school student, if you're coming in school for half the week, you'll come to school for 2 days and you have 4 of your major classes in person. That's English, math, science, and social studies. So you'll see all 4 of your majors. And as the elementary described earlier, you know, you come in, you settle into a classroom, and then the teachers will rotate through who's next. So we do save some of that time on transitioning between classes. So I think the teachers are finding that they're able to use that 45 minutes pretty efficiently, even with then having kids get up and have mass breaks or mobility breaks at different times throughout the morning. So you see all 4 of your majors, and then when you get home in the afternoon, you'll have asynchronous work from 2 of the specials classes. So we were careful and conscientious in the summertime about building a schedule that would still include that opportunity to explore different fields with the specials. So you get your PE, art, music, and so forth. And then on the days that your cohort is at home, you see your specials live in the morning, so there's still live engagement opportunities. You also will have work from 2 of your major subject areas that's rolled out asynchronously, and there's times in the morning when you're expected to work on that as a student. And then in the afternoon, you'll see the other 2 majors live, and then the next day you see the other 2 majors. So even on the days that kids are at home, they're having at least 2 live classes in the morning, and with 8th grade, they have the 5th major of a world language. So that would also be in the morning time. And then they have 2 live classes in the afternoon. So there's a lot of live face-to-face time. We wanted to make sure that was happening, in part in listening to school committee meetings and hearing parent and community comments. What we were hearing from parents was that they really wanted to know that their kids were engaged in learning and being given, you know, realistic comparisons to a regular school year, but also that they wanted to know that they were accountable. For parents who have to go to work, we want to support them in the way that if a child isn't logging into the classes, that somebody knows where they are, or that somebody's being alerted if they're not logging in, right? So part of it is just, you know, the schools, through all this, we've discovered that schools serve so many functions, not only providing intellectual stimulation and growth, but also guaranteeing physical safety. You know, and that runs the range of providing food lunches and everything else that we talked a lot about in the spring, to also just holding kids accountable. And so that speaks to Justin's point about we've really increased our attendance and the attention that we pay to attendance throughout the day. It's one thing when a kid comes into a school building, we know if they depart, right, or figure it out pretty quickly. Rumor mill is helpful in that regard on a normal school year. But when half the student body or 2/3 of the student body is at home, we really had to increase the amount of times that we're taking attendance. And teachers have, and I think, appreciated that. It is an extra burden in terms of just sort of management. We've tried to find ways with some groups to make it more manageable. But at the same time, it also helps the teachers to keep track on a very regular basis of who has accessed their lessons, who has had the opportunity to hand in work, so that if something is missing, they kind of have a running list of whether they know why somebody may have not submitted something and that they know it's coming later that week, or if they need to be following up with the families. I'm hoping that families are having that same experience at home and feeling that the communication has been pretty robust from the school, to use the term robust. I think I was the first one on your bingo card. Yeah. But really, to make, part of what, to my point earlier, what we're trying to do is make sure that families know that the schools, we can, in a way, sort of say, we got this, we're trying to support you with everything that we know families are dealing with right now. I sort of lost my train of thought there. Justin made the point about the one-to-one technology, which has gone a lot smoother. I think we were anxious about that and the timing of that, but the necessity was pretty clear, and I do think the community rallied around making sure that students were well provisioned for this new model of learning by making sure that kids either got Chromebooks from family sources or, tech services have been working, I'm sure, 28/7 to make sure that kids have the technology that they need, and also making contact with BELD and other community resources to help families get their internet up to speed, which is, remarkable, things that we didn't even think about last year, that have really helped the school become that community partner that I think we often want to be and feel like we are, and find new community partners out there to help us get kids the experiences that they need. When you think about what is a student going to need when they enter the 21st century working world and possibly go on to higher education and all that, I think when, from one perspective, all the negatives that we're dealing with in the course of a pandemic, I also think that we're finding new avenues to preparing our students for that world, in a meaningful way. The biggest challenge from my perspective, from the principal's office, has been the concept of how do we build community, at the middle school level. The third aspect of education beyond the academic and the physical safety of our students is the social growth. And so, we've been working across town to make sure that kids do feel that connection. At the middle school, you start to have mascots and athletic teams that you're really sort of engaging with in preparation for moving on to the high school, and developing that town identity. And so part of what we're saying in the course of the pandemic was, how do we build that sense of community? For the first few days, I know Justin was expressing very clearly the frustration of not having the schedule, but when life gives you lemons, we make lemonade. And so we did turn that to the orientation program, which was a way for the students to start to engage with the new model of learning, but in kind of a low pressure way. At the same time, we were also introducing them to the concept of teams in remote learning and what it means to be part of the team, and build that identity in that way. We've tried to continue it throughout the year with things as simple as, I know Mr. Sheen and I are both posting morning announcements, so the kids kind of have a routine and have a sense of what it means to be part of the East Middle School community or the South Middle School community. I've gotten a few pictures sent to me of kids rising and reciting along with me on their computers, the Pledge of Allegiance on a daily basis. And it's some of those routines that I think just, everyone knows it's different, but it kind of communicates to kids that we care about them and that we want to be there with them during that time. And, I think that's part of why teachers are anxious about what a mask breaks mean. Right now, we're using that for a lot of the community building. We're not playing catch with our hands anymore, but they're sometimes kicking around a ball, and just, to my point earlier about the in-person class setting, you don't move. So if you are in a cohort with 10 other kids, you're with those 10 kids for the entire school year, or at least thus far. So knowing who's sitting around the room with you, when you can't turn and talk to them and you can't get broken up into groups with them in person, we're trying to form those connections in these other times so that then when they're going home and connecting back with their majors, they kind of know who's in the group and who is part of this journey with them. So I think that's a little bit of the student experience. I don't know if there's any questions.
Madam Chair, do you want to go to questions?
I'd say since we already said we'll keep it going, let's keep it going to the high school and then we'll get everybody at once.
But we're not actually, we don't have high school representation tonight, given that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's
I
okay. The first
misunderstood.
days, yeah, first of all, they loved remote, and we gotta get some feedback from parents about changing out of remote because they're understanding that, the actual synchronous time is gonna be less than it is when they're in full remote, but that's for another day. Yeah, I do have Rebecca and Jim on the line. I think probably the right next step would be have questions of elementary and middle, and then kind of see where the questions go, and we can go from there.
Okay, let's do it. Any questions from the committee?
Please, Madam Chair.
Sure.
Okay, well, first of all, I think we all would like to thank you all for all the work that you're doing. I know again, as has been said many times, these are unprecedented times. There's no rule book. And certainly we value the work that everyone has done to get us to the point we're at today. We certainly hear the challenges, and it's great to have an open forum like this where we can kind of engage together, because honestly, the way we work as a team to figure this out, the better the better we'll serve the students and the parents of this town. So I heard a lot about challenges, and I think, one of the things we want to understand is we hear a lot from parents, obviously, about the concern between synchronous and asynchronous learning. And I realize that, you can't be in 2 or 3 places at the same time, as the way the hybrid schedule works, and if we extended the day or whatever the next step is. So from your perspective, how can we give students more of a synchronous experience than we do today, especially as the schedule changes and as we look at getting closer to some kind of back to school completely? That's open to anyone that has an idea.
Well, for elementary, I can say that we are providing more synchronous than asynchronous already. I don't believe that elementary can provide any more. It's to the point where we're trying to even have them release a little bit more and let the kids do a little bit more on their own. They are making packets and stuff that parents come and pick up, whether they're in full remote or not, because we want to get the kids off the screen sometimes. So some of the asynchronous work is papers or games, like they're sending home games. They all got these great math kits. So they all have materials, so they're able to do that at home as part of their asynchronous to get off of the computer at some point. The challenge will be if we do go full day and keep it like half and half, the hybrid full day, the asynchronous time will increase because, like you said, the teachers can't be in both places at once. But as of right now, as far as elementary, I believe I know they're getting much more synchronous than asynchronous. And the asynchronous, we're trying to do games and paperwork or like routine things like a program like Literacy Pro or Dreambox.
I would just add to what Stacey said that I think our concern as elementary teachers is that if we do go to full day and change this schedule, that our students are actually going to get more asynchronous time. It's going to actually take away some of our synchronous instruction time, because in the afternoon, every afternoon, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, we are able to be synchronous with our whole class from, there are little bits they go off and on, but we are able to teach science and social studies in the afternoon. That's what's allotted for that time, synchronously with our whole class all 4 afternoons. If we do move to a full day and the students stay, we'll only have 1 cohort with us. So that means the other cohort is going to have to be doing asynchronous work during that time. So we're actually that's what we're worried about. and don't know, that concerns us that we are going to take some of that live teaching time away from them, unless there's some, we haven't figured out a way on how we could keep it happening. So.
Makes sense, makes sense. So my final, I guess maybe this is more of a comment, but maybe a question as well. So if you, I guess two things. What message would you like us to bring back to the full committee? I think we've gotten some great feedback, but if you had a message to bring back to the full committee as to, what you would like us to consider as we work through how we move back to full in person, what would that be? And I guess, the second part of that is if we were on the screen as teachers and you were in our seats, how would you look at this and how would you approach it? If that's a fair question.
I think what I would want you to go back with is that we do want our kids back full time. There's no question. That's what teachers want. That's what principals want. That's what kids and families want. Safely, when it's safe, correct? But the number one thing, and I think I heard Justin mention it from the middle school, and Justin, I've never met you, but I'm quoting you, that getting things too fast without planning is really hard on the teachers. The amount of planning and preparation, and I can just speak for the principals, what we did prior to opening, and the reason why we opened smoothly was weeks upon hours upon hours upon weeks upon all this planning. And then to be able to do that, we can't just say, okay, we're going to change everything next week. We have to have time to be able to plan and make sure that we're getting everyone what they need. And I think that we have the same goal as you, and I want everyone to understand that. I don't want parents to think teachers don't want kids back. There is not a single teacher, I believe, that would prefer to teach remote than in person. But we need the time to plan it out correctly, to do it right. We want to do it right. And we want every step along the way to be leading towards that, getting them back full time.
And Stacey, just to kind of follow up on that. So how do we, I think that's a great point. How do we work together so that we're not working in a different universe than you are to work that plan? Because the goal ultimately is to get kids all the way back in school. So how do we bridge, the gap from here to there?
So if I can actually jump in on that, sorry, Ms. Soto. It dovetails nicely into the question that I wanted to ask, which was, is there interest, and Frank and Jim have not heard me say this, so feel free to jump in and tell me why this is not a great idea. One thing that I was thinking about was I felt like the working groups in particular of the reopening committee were really useful and really effective. The larger committee obviously was great as well. We had such broad representation, but I do wonder, is this time or is this an opportunity for us to revive, in particular, those working groups of the reopening committee? Because they did have such nice representation across schools, across roles. There were parents, there were teachers, there were admin, there were school committee members like yours truly, that, they seem to be quite effective. And I wonder if those are good teams that could be thinking about and talking about these types of issues as a broader group. So I don't know, Frank and Jim, if you have any thoughts on that. I know I'm kind of just throwing that out there, but I really enjoyed the work that we did and found the teams to really be effective. And I just can't help but wonder if that's a good way to start to tackle some of these issues and also be respectful of teacher and admin need for this planning, which I'm definitely getting that message from this meeting.
So thank you. That's a great
Before you
kind of
jump in,
segue for me a little bit. Well, go ahead.
I would just add, I think that's good direction, but obviously we're getting one perspective tonight from one elementary school, one middle school. I think the experiences may be a little bit different from what we're hearing from parents in some of the other schools. So I think we need to put together, if it's going to be a working group, it needs to be a working group that represents sort of the good and the bad that's happening in the district.
Yeah.
Right.
So the working groups were pretty diverse, but I'd love to hear your perspective on it, Frank.
No, I mean, I obviously, and it's to echo some of the points you've already made, if we think about this, well, let me just say this. The working teams that happened over the summer had a very specific task and a very specific goal. And I think they did do great work. And, when we opened, we were all kind of scrambling administratively for teachers to just open the building and to get kids in and to start to get into routines. And I know it feels like forever and a day, but honestly, if you can believe it, we're at 3.5 weeks right now. So, I think, and I totally understand as a parent who has a student who's going through a full remote experience right now that I can comment on later if anyone really wants to know the personal stress that I'm going through, but I doubt you do. I think we've done a tremendous job. Are we where we want to be? No. And I think the message that we need to make sure the parents understand is that we're continuing to think about how do we get better at this, and we're not there with what we're doing yet. And that's not to say that we're looking for perfection with what we're doing yet, because I think that naturally we want to be back full day, full time, right? That's the ultimate goal. We may not be able to get there for conditions of the virus and things that we can't control, but I think that as we move forward, and Stacey said this very well, everything we do in terms of any things that we change to or implement over the coming weeks and months has to really make to support the idea that we want to get back full time. So if we implement a schedule, for example, that we have to flip upside down in order to get back full time because miraculously the virus goes away, that's not good for us. And I think what Stacey was talking about with planning, what I think we've lacked in this last couple of months, because we've been doing everything we can to get the buildings open. I can tell you that I have spent most of my time with Air Exchange spreadsheets and talking to engineers and talking to others about the conditions of our buildings and how do we get them online. And I think we've done a good job with that to this point, given the condition and age of the buildings. But now we're at a point, and I said today was like the first day that I, as a superintendent, was able to not think about a facility issue or some other issue and kind of step back and reflect a little bit about where we are. And again, I remind myself we're 3.5 weeks in, but I think now we're at a point where we're ready to bring a broader group together. And whether it's the same group or a different group, it definitely needs to be broad. It definitely needs to represent all voices, and to plan and think about and plan and have conversations around how do we get better and what can our next steps be. And so I think that is the perfect logical next step, but I think that we also need to make sure that we identify the goal, right? So we have to plan backwards from something. And I think the only way to think about it, seems to me, is to think about planning backwards from how would we get to a full return? What would be the steps to get there if everything fell into place the way that we would just love it to? And we also know that we saw, I think yesterday, the day before, Marshfield has already closed an elementary school for 2 weeks, right? So we know that whatever we do could fall away in a heartbeat, and we got to be able to be ready for that. I think what the biggest challenge we've had and did have was at the middle school. We just had a tremendous number of students who, in hindsight, I wish we had not been quite so flexible with parents' requests. I wish we had probably just said, like in August, or this, you've got to pick remote or hybrid, and that's what you've got to do, because when we had so many students shift from a hybrid model into remote within the weeks just leading up to school, it flipped our staff. We actually have almost had to flip our staff upside down in terms of the number of teaching remote versus the number of teaching hybrid. And it's not an excuse, it's a lesson learned. We cannot plan schedule well unless we know who's going to be there so that we can staff it. So that's a long way to answer the question, Ms. Dolan, I'm sorry, but just to kind of map it out, I think that we first have to get a goal of full return. I think we have to kind of target what would be an ideal time to do that. And then I think we have to plan backwards from there. And I think we have to do it in a way that's thoughtful. It provides the kind of time for everyone to plan, whether it's teacher planning, whether it's parent planning, whether it's administrative planning. I mean, we've got to do this well, and we've got to do this right. And you know, again, I'll say once again, you know, we all would agree that our goal is sustainability in whatever model we're in. We know that pretty much every model that we're in, short of full return, is going to have compromises. I mean, but we need to continue to challenge ourselves to figure out how we address those. So that's my 3 cents, I guess.
And I think just to go, just to add on that, one of the things I was thinking about as we were just talking about it was that are we where we want to be, as you had just said, Dr. Hackett, and the answer to that is no, because obviously we want to look to a full return. And with the original question that was asked, which was based on synchronous and asynchronous learning, I think that we have to, if the ultimate goal is to have all students back full time, that is going to end up coming at a cost, because the ultimate thing is to have teachers in front of students more frequently. And as Damon had mentioned when he was talking about middle school, the way relationships get built, yes, they can get built through a computer, but the more that those relationships are being built when the students are sitting in front of us is how we actually get the stronger relationships and the commitment from the students, so that when they are home working asynchronously, they have an ultimate goal to want to please the teacher and want to get the work done. So I think as we move towards that goal, and we might have to move away from that focus of just how much synchronous instruction is there, because it ends up having people come back in person full time. We're going to have to make a concession somewhere else for that to happen.
Yeah, makes sense. And I
think, you know, sorry if I can jump in, George. This is, I think, important information for us to communicate to parents, and I know that that's always tricky. And I can appreciate that, you know, that people tend to maybe not listen to the entire story or take a piece of it and run with it, and that can be incredibly frustrating, I'm sure, from the perspective of everyone who works for BPS, as well as for those of us on the school committee who, you know, try to be very careful about and thorough with the information that we're sharing. But I think if we can let parents in on this thought process and this procedure that we'll be going through, I think that will be very helpful. And I think parents have a tremendous responsibility in this regard too, to you know, understand that not all of the information that we share is going to be perfect and will never change. And so, you know, parents have that responsibility to understand that if they want to sort of hear the inner workings, they have to understand that it's not going to be perfect. And I believe that 99% of parents are up for that. And I think that that's, you know, a really important piece of the puzzle, because I think people can feel some relief in hearing the goal is to get kids back full time. We need to figure out the right way to do it, and we need to do it in a way that doesn't upend, you know, everything else that we've been doing and ruin all the careful planning that has taken place to get us to this point. So, you know, that's something that I'd like us to address as a team as well.
And just to briefly, you know, I think I know what's been challenging for parents, and it's really been challenging for me as a superintendent and us as an administrative group, is that I've not, I'll speak for myself, felt comfortable guaranteeing anything yet. You know, what we've experienced over the last 3.5 weeks, we've learned a tremendous amount from, and would do things differently had we known it, but we've never done it before. So I've been very leery about putting out hard dates. I've been very leery about putting out hard commitments, because I can tell you that even today, there are a couple of significant changes that we just never could have expected. But I do think right now, 3.5 weeks in, we are at a point where we kind of know a little bit more about what we're doing and what it looks like in person. And I think we know, more importantly, we know how to plan it moving forward. You know, what are the parameters? What are the things we're going to have to say? We can do this, we can't do this. You know, I think the remote hybrid piece of it, for example, with parents and choice, is something we have to address. We can't have it happen to us again. In an effort to be generous and to be considerate and I think do the right thing, you know, it really it put us in a different place very quickly around our scheduling and around how we provide services. And we've been making adjustments since we started to deal just with that issue. So as we move forward, I think we need to kind of set some expectations and just be clear that, you know, here's what we can do and here's what we can't do. Those are the parameters. And then to your point, Ms. Dolan, we can open that process up now more to public view, so to speak, now that we better understand how we can approach the work. So.
And I think that's an important distinction. So, you know, maybe it isn't as much about hard dates, which I can appreciate the hesitancy around that, but maybe it's more about letting parents understand the process that we're going through and the steps that we're going through. And, you know, again, parents, myself included, have to be cool with that. You know, we have to understand that there's a lot of moving pieces and we've never done this before. You know, but to understand the process and the goals, I think will help. And so, you know, I actually am a parent of a child who is in the schools right now as a middle schooler. And, you know, I will say there's been some bumps in the road, but overall, I think it's been great. I mean, I think, you know, I think the efforts to get to know the students at the beginning of the year were well spent. There was one point where my son came flying out of his room and said, I need the dog because, you know, we're showing something special to the people in our class. And so he had to get the dog and show the dog. And he told me one of his teachers speaks in a New Jersey accent all the time, like just to make them laugh. And so it's been fun to hear just some of the little anecdotes that he's come out with in getting to know his teachers and him getting to know them. And, you know, 4 absences for one of his chorus classes showed up in Aspen. So I'm finding Aspen to be very useful and figuring out that there is a little, you know, bump in his schedule that we needed to resolve, get some chorus to make up, but all that's fine. I mean, it's really hard on parents, I think, for some parents more than others, and it's hard to imagine that we keep saying we're 3.5 weeks in. So, you know, the parents that I've spoken to, and there's been a lot, I'm just encouraging them to speak to their building principals and teachers, let them know what's going on and to hang in there. And, you know, everybody's really working hard to get this figured out. So.
Yeah, and just to add something in, and again, I think everybody's experience is different. I think what we have to work on, you know, as working groups or however we're going to do this, is consistency. So, you know, Jen, obviously your experience is different than parents that have multiple children in different levels, right? And those are the ones that see inconsistency right now. And again, it's because we're, you know, as they say, flying the plane while we're trying to repair it, right? So that's the thing. Those are the kinds of things that we need to work on, because when you have multiple children in, you know, multiple levels, and you know, you're having to assist on those days when things are asynchronous, I think those are the frustrations that we're hearing from that side. And I think that's the challenge all of us as a team have to work together on. Because, you know, obviously the goal is to be consistent across the district, and then consistent as we move toward getting back to school.
I can just add that we work when parents, and I agree with you, Jen, that if parents notify the school principal or the teacher that they're having difficulty because they have 3 kids in different grade levels and they're all trying to work at the same thing, we are really good at troubleshooting and problem solving, and we immediately set up meetings to talk to the parent to figure out how we can help. We can't help if we don't know there's a struggle. So if they skip the part of coming to us first, we can't help them. So we want to help them and we want to be able to see the bigger picture with them, but sometimes they just can't see the bigger picture right then because they're in the trenches. So I would encourage them always to come to us because that's why we're there. We want to help.
That's a great point, Stacey. I mean, we were talking about that earlier today, that, you know, the first line should be to the building principal. You know, I hope we get that message out through this meeting to parents that, you know, the best way to fix an issue that you're having is to go to the building principal. And
I would say the classroom teacher first, then the principal,
Yeah.
because sometimes the teachers can help themselves first and you don't want them to feel like they went over. So to talk to the teacher and the principal both. I would think the teacher would always want to know there's an issue too.
that's a good message. Yeah, thank you.
So I do think, Mr. Kokoris, the first question you asked was, what would we like you to be communicating out? And I think it's exactly this. You know, whether we're looking at working groups and trying to build a consistent response across the district, or whether we're looking at individual cases and trying to figure out how can we make this work for this family or for this student. I think the communication is key, because a lot of times it's easy to look at something and see that it's different and make a presumption, right? And assume that either my kid's missing out or that this, you know, has this even been thought through, or whatever the case may be, which is some of the emails that I've been getting. But I've appreciated all the emails that I have gotten, or when teachers have come down and mentioned communication that they've had, because there are so many decisions that we're making on a regular basis. You know, I come home and my poor wife is getting an earful from me on a regular basis about, you know, I did this, and she's like, well, why wouldn't you just do that? And it's like, well, because that would open this, and the other door. That I think it's important to, you know, to give us the opportunity to explain our thinking, but also understanding that we need to then be on the other side of that too, listening, right? And hearing that this was our thinking. If that's not working, is there another solution out there? And so I like the idea of moving back to working groups, but I really appreciated the opportunity to be invited even to this. You know, I was listening to the school committee meeting last week and hearing conversations about synchronous learning and extending the day, and thinking to myself, a lot of these decisions were made in the summer. You know, we were really focused on a lot of questions, right? We didn't know what was going to happen when school opened. And our prime concern was safety. How do we do this safely? And so one of the academic benefits is that we've gotten small cohorts, but really that was a safety decision, right? Was that we wanted to start with small groups, see where we could go from there. From the middle school level, and I assume it's the same at the other levels, but that actually answered some other questions too, because when you talk about extending the school day, honestly, I start palpitating, because one of the decisions that was made was looking at how music class could be held asynchronously or remote live at home. PE class the same, because as the weather starts to get worse, there's no large space. We can have kids huffing and puffing and exercising, and we want them to be working out. In music class, you know, if they're singing and projecting, or if they're blowing across a woodwind instrument, there's a potential to be expelling a lot of virus. And so, you know, if we're looking to make changes, I think it would be good to have a group that we then take the feedback and go back and do some research and find out, what can we safely do? What are other districts doing? Are other districts having PE in person? Are other districts having music in person? Because without those opportunities in the schedule, you know, we pulled those out and had them be remote, so that the teachers still had time for the meetings that Justin talked about, and the planning time that we all know teachers need on a regular basis, staggered throughout the week. And so if we're going to make any changes, it's just important to really think through all of the ways that can tumble into other decisions that were made. And not to say that it can't happen, it's just that we want to make sure, to Dr. Hackett's point, you know, that we have the time to think it all through, and, you know, still we're going to make adjustments on the fly. But, you know, for us to hear from the parents' expertise of like what it looks like in the home environment, and for you to hear from our expertise of what it means in the school environment, I think is exactly the lines of communication that, you know, my principal colleagues and teachers are all hoping to open up.
David, I think that's a great, yeah, I'm sorry, of course, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, totally agree. I think this, you know, the fact that you spent the time today with us is extremely beneficial, and we really value that. So I appreciate it.
I could just contribute a little something to the conversation, in going along with what everybody else is saying. If the ultimate goal at some point is to return completely in person, there are some inherent timelines that are built into a move to that place that take significant time. So when Justin accurately pointed out that the schedule at the beginning of the year was somewhat chaotic, partly it was due because we had to put the schedule together within about a 3-week window. And that's not how you build a schedule. A schedule typically takes months to put together. So as we have these working groups and we incorporate the feedback that we're receiving, understand that, you know, once a decision is made, it doesn't mean the next day that decision can be implemented, that there are inherent timelines in terms of what it takes to get to those places. that occupy time not only as far as scheduling something is concerned, but professional development or any other trainings that might need to occur. So a decision made at the end of this month might not even be possible until the beginning of January, if not later. So this is something to keep in mind as we have these conversations. Again, the goal would be to get everybody back in person through all the hard work of our teaching staff across the district. And not every student is able to flourish in the full remote environment for a host of different reasons. So that should be our goal, and certainly is our goal. But understand that it doesn't happen overnight, no matter what.
I just wanted to add one thing, if you don't mind, with the question of, what you wanted to be able to take back to the school committee. I think one of the things I keep hearing over and over again is that we've only been doing this for 3.5 weeks. And from the classroom perspective and from what we're doing every day as teachers, we are working like so hard. And it took so much time, energy, and effort to get to the place where we are right now, 3.5 weeks in. It was so much work to get here and to get a system that is actually working well for the students. There are so many moving parts. And I think the biggest anxiety right now, I know from so many teachers that I'm talking to at so many levels, is changing that, because there's so many moving parts, and all the work that we did and that we're just implementing is now possibly going to change, and we're going to have to start all over again and maybe make some significant changes, is really overwhelming as far as from our end. I'm also a parent in the system. I teach second grade, but I have a middle schooler and a high schooler. So I'm seeing it at all levels. I'm not home. I'm at work 5 days a week. So my middle schooler and high schooler are home on their own for most of the time. And it's some days not going so great because they're unattended. So believe me, I want the kids back in school 100% of the time, more than anyone. My own children and the children in my class. I would feel so much better if my kids were in school and I was in school and I wasn't worrying about whether or not they were on and off classes and actually doing their work, and then coming home at night after teaching and planning all day, and then having to go through Google Classroom and Aspen and make sure that my 8th grader with ADHD actually logged into class and did some assignments. I mean, that's the reality of, when teachers, and we do get to pass each other, so many of us are parents too, and whether we're parents in Braintree or parents in another town, like the struggle is real. Like there's a lot of tears, a lot of days, not necessarily by what I'm doing day in and day out in my classroom, but being a parent in a pandemic with some kids who are hybrid, some who are remote, and a teacher, to then be changing this in such a short time is really overwhelming. I guess is the big takeaway as we think about how fast we want to move into a full day. That's the reality for a lot of people. And I read Facebook once in a while, and I do see, what people are saying out there, and some of it, most of it I disagree with, because they're not really there every day. They really don't know, like when we were talking about letting them know what the process is like, all these people on Facebook and who send messages on what they think is going on, they don't really know what's going on and how much work and time and effort and energy is going into trying to make a successful school experience for our kids in town. And so I guess if there was something to take away to bring back to the rest of the committee, I would say that there are a lot of teachers in this system and families that are in the same situation I am. And my last thing is that I do have sisters who live in other towns, and what's happening in other towns, as well as we were talking about what's happening in other places. One of my sisters, her kids are in a hybrid model. They go to school 2 days, but the other 3 days are completely asynchronous. So they are doing 3 days of asynchronous work. So what we're doing here in Braintree, we're really doing it well, and we're giving our kids at every level as much synchronous time as we possibly can. And we're not just saying your only time that you're working with a teacher is when you're live in school. They are making those connections every day, and it's not happening in every community around us. That was just my last share.
And stay off Facebook. We try to.
It's very rare that I go on, George. Very rare. When I do, I usually vow that I'm going to delete the app forever.
And I think, like Mrs. Gaffney said, and I will always call her Mrs. Gaffney, since she was my son's teacher. We acknowledge that it's really difficult for parents. Like, I don't want parents to ever think that we don't get it or, we're not sympathetic to that. That is not the case at all. It's just, being on school committee, I guess we're in a unique position of being able to see both sides. And so I think if we can help parents understand the process, because really everyone's doing this for the kids. The kids are the most important thing and the reason that we're all here. So I think if we can help parents understand the thought process behind what we're doing to make this a stable, fulfilling, engaging experience for the kids, then I think that will be time well spent.
Just to add to that, I mean, I know people are anxious about the next step. I think that, as we've experienced this and as we've learned how we're doing this, we're starting to be able to have better, more reflective conversations internally, administratively. I mean, it's truly been duct tape and patches to just get through days, to understand and anticipate what's going to happen. Everything's looked so differently, so we've not had the kind of the luxury, so to speak, of even our regular leadership meetings, and we generally meet quite regularly in person, which is also another issue in terms of planning. But we're at a point now where we can begin doing that work again. So whatever we do needs to be informed by what we're doing well and what we need to improve on, and we just need to be able to understand how to move forward in a way that's planful and in a way that gets us closer to the ultimate goal of getting everyone back. Because what we don't want to do is implement certain things and then have to completely change it because we implemented something just to get through a patch of time. As a parent, I want to, I can only imagine, and I know because I'm also a parent. I mean, the communications are difficult coming from school systems right now about the future of what's going to happen and where people are going to go with this. And that's what I think right now we're in the best position we've been in to be able to start giving that kind of information and talking about, here's our process, here's where we want to go with this, here's the planning that's going to happen, here are the opportunities for discussions. We held several parent meetings, as you know, Jim and myself, administratively prior to the start of the school year. And, that was when the best conversations happened. And that was when we were able to kind of explain better what we're trying to do and had input into things that we hadn't even thought of. So, that's where I think we need to kind of reset and get there again. But we do need to, I think from a leadership perspective, and I include the school committee in that, we need to commit to the goal. That, like any good business, you got to have a goal, you got to have a mission, you got to commit to it, because that's the only way you can plan to get there, is to know where you're headed. And kind of an oversimplification, but it kind of is true. We've not really known that for sure for the last few weeks as we've been trying to get our kids and our staff back in schools.
Yeah, Jen, if I may, through you, have we thought about the 2 days on and then the Wednesday off? Have we thought about moving a 3-day to, Group A, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Group B, Thursday, Friday, and then the following week switch it? So Monday, Tuesday be Group A, then Wednesday would be Group B, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all half days, so we can ease into it.
It's a great point. That's where I think that's where we are right now. I think we're in a place where we can discuss, if our goal is ultimately to get everyone back in, what are the models that we would go to next? And how do we plan for those, commit to them and plan for them? And I think now we are more in a place where we can have a discussion broader than what we've kind of had up to this point. So maybe that's certainly an option. I mean, there are a couple other options that you know, we've kind of thought about, but you know, I think we got to get a group of people together, the right people in the room, broaden the participation, pros and cons, work through some of those models, think about what it means, try to plan for the you know, unexpected consequences of certain decisions that we make, and just be really clear about that planning process, and then be able to communicate it well, so that we're making the right choice for the next step. And that's been my biggest concern over the last couple of weeks, is that next step has got to be right. It's got to be right for a lot of reasons. It's got to be right because we want to do it right. It's got to be right because it's got to get us to a place where we're going to be able to come back full time at some point if all the conditions allow. Because if we're not planning for that, then I don't know what we're planning for. So that model, Mr. Chavis, is actually got a little bit of discussion around it today, along with a couple other things that would definitely be something we should be exploring, I think.
Yeah, I don't want to rush into just jumping in the full day and having to shut everything down because we raced into it.
Right, exactly.
And Damon, can you loosen up your tie, buddy? You look uncomfortable.
Can I just tell you that these are the moments that I look at Damon and say, you know, okay, there's the Damon that I expect to see, that I just haven't seen a lot. So it's kind of a treat for me tonight to see him just well buttoned up and.
But he's kind of putting you to shame there, Frank.
I know, and you know what? I'm trying to give him that opportunity because he tries to do that anyway.
All of us.
It should be noted, I haven't stood up during this time, so
Don't even go there.
You don't know.
That is true. That is true.
Wicked
And his hair looks great too, of course.
Oh yeah. Go
Hey.
Go to the hair. And he's tall.
And young.
When people were talking about, you know, oh, I also have a kid in the system, I did prevent myself from saying, I'm also a client. So, you know.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments from the committee?
Jen, can I ask
Or
one more
questions?
thing?
Please.
To Mr. Chafe's comment, that I would just want to make sure that I agree about that whole Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday possibility, but we have to gain that, there has to be something that gives away. So I would want parents, like back to what Mr. Cora said, parents need to understand in order to get to our final goal, there might be some time along the way that they're losing some of that synchronous learning and going to have more asynchronous. And maybe they're getting assignments from the teacher during the day on Wednesday, and then it's homework, but that's asynchronous work on Thursday, Friday from the teacher. But I cannot see adding more time face-to-face without taking away some of the synchronous. We can't do both. So I think that it has to be a little bit of a give and take, understanding that our main goal is to get back to the full-time classroom.
And I would just suggest that I'm not sure we're even ready to say that exactly yet, because we really haven't. I mean, I think the next steps with this are to explore the models that we could move to and just go through the pros and cons, the strengths and the weaknesses, and, you know, kind of try to talk as a larger team about what makes the most sense and you know, what's the best fit for trying to get the most of what we're trying to get. And I appreciate the comment someone made earlier about you know, the synchronous versus asynchronous. I can tell you my own experience right now is it is all asynchronous if the student is not in person. So you know, we are doing a good job trying to thread the needle on that, but that's what's made this so difficult and frustrating for parents too, I'm sure.
So, Dr. Hackett, do you think at our next school committee meeting, could we get an update on the process that you're thinking about going through to address these models?
Yes, yep, definitely. I can give put a few options out for discussion, and I've got to be meeting with administrators this week as well. So directors and principals, as well as the VEA, you know, kind of map out what it could look like.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Claire Brady has her hand up. I don't know, given that kind of invited her to speak earlier on, as a teacher, I think.
Yes, please.
She's muted.
Yep. Claire, you're unmuted on our end.
Okay, am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are.
All right, great, thank you. I want to thank you. I want to thank the chair, giving me an opportunity just to quickly say, I just want to amplify everything that everyone said, the principals and the teachers that spoke, and Dr. Hackett just so perfectly expressed everything that's been happening. And I really, really look forward to the opportunity for us to, as a community, make decisions. I think having broad stakeholder input is towards the plan is a great idea. And we really look forward to engaging with that. And I would just also want to echo what Stacey said. The best part is seeing the kids and seeing how resilient they are and seeing how that they are just ready to, to get back into it. And so we're all doing it for them. So thank you very much for the minute to chime in.
Thank you.
Claire.
Thank you. I do see that we have one other hand raised. We could take a little bit of public comment in this meeting. I'd like to limit everybody to just a couple of minutes. That would be appreciated.
Okay. All right, so Karen Carey.
Thank you for having me in this meeting. I wanted to give a little bit of feedback, especially since we have a lot of elementary school representatives here, but elementary seems to be going extremely well based on the feedback I've received from parents. I also have a kindergartner. So she's getting a ton of synchronous, which I think is really cool for her. It is definitely challenging for a parent to navigate, but we're getting a little bit better on that. I do agree with the communication piece. As far as the different levels, it's kind of not a one size fits all, but the teaching is a little bit different in middle school and high school versus elementary, where elementary has synchronous teaching on Wednesdays. And I think parents would really like some understanding of how the Wednesday came about for middle school and high school, and why there isn't any synchronous teaching on those days. And I know it was said that there's a lot of meetings for the teachers and things like that. And I think it would be really helpful for the parents to understand that, because we know that the teachers are teaching one class 3 different ways. But I feel like with the middle school level, there's been a little bit of a disconnect with the de-leveling, that maybe the kids aren't really getting pushed to their potential because there's no levels. So right now the teaching isn't as robust as I think we hope it to be. And I do have a question for, this might apply to elementary and middle school. So we had been talking about, George had mentioned at one of the last school committee meetings about live streaming. And I know that it was said that it was undesirable. However, is there a way that maybe the teachers could record their teachings in the morning with, like, say on Mondays, they're teaching a lesson with cohort A. They record it and then they post that out there for cohort B, so that in essence, their cohort B is still getting synchronous teaching, but yet it's a recorded video in a way, but there are questions that are being asked by cohort A that might be the same questions that cohort B was planning on asking. I don't know if it's something that would work, but I'm thinking outside of the box, where if we went to full day, we would be losing that synchronous piece. And if the teachers recorded that and posted it out there, then they essentially are only teaching that one way to both cohorts. And then another thought would be on Wednesdays, where, and this might apply more to middle school, that if the teachers in middle school recorded those sessions, 2 days, then posted those videos on Wednesdays with additional questions or additional problems, then that might boost up the Wednesday teaching a little bit, so that parents feel as though there's a lot more that the kids are getting from it, that they can go back and they can rewatch those videos if there's something that they missed. It also might help if studying for a test or a quiz or something like that. And it would also reinforce maybe the lesson being taught, that they can go back and hear this again if they miss something. Because in all honesty, when a kid is sitting home and doing remote work, they're so distracted and they're looking at their dog and they, are spinning around in their chair. Just a thought, thinking outside of the box, but I do agree that rushing into something is definitely harder, I think, on the teachers than anyone else. For the parents, to send our kids into school full day, that's great. But as was said, we're going to be paying a price for that. And that price would be, we end up with more asynchronous, which a lot of kids really, really struggle with. So, my thought was, if we could think out of the box and really maybe try to test something like that, if the teachers thought that it would work. I'm not in a classroom. I have no idea if it would work, but I'm just trying to see if there's something that we could do that would reduce the workload for teachers, so they're not trying to figure out how to teach one lesson 3 ways, but would also give the kids that face-to-face that they need, even if it's not truly 100% face-to-face. Does any of this make sense?
Go ahead, Mr. Lee can speak to this a little bit.
Thank you, Ms. Carey. Yeah, I mean, certainly a lot of what you
Dr. Hackett, you're muted.
Yeah, you got muted.
Sorry. Mr. Lee he just did like 2 minutes of really good stuff. So we'll see if he can recreate it.
Sadly for everybody, I'm a one-trick pony, and that was my moment. Thank you, Ms. Carey. Certainly some of the ideas that you have are things that we have discussed internally. As people have settled into this type of instructional modality and the hybrid model and working with cohorts and the level of technology that they previously had not been comfortable with in terms of use because they simply didn't have access. All the things that you mentioned certainly demand further exploration as we talk about what the next logical steps are in moving forward. We certainly understand that it is not advantageous to lose some of the synchronous opportunities that we have. So when we talk about working groups that include parents and teachers and people who are intimately involved in how the students are working, these are conversations that should continue to see if we can pick out the best ideas from it and implement it where it might be appropriate. So none of those ideas are bad ones at all and absolutely deserve further exploration.
And I think just to add to that, I mean, I can see those discussions kind of happening simultaneously in a planning process that, as we work toward the best next step for us in the ultimate goal of trying to bring students back full day, full time. So I appreciate the comments, and I think some of this stuff is going to happen kind of organically too, in terms of teachers actually trying different things out that we can and will also learn from. So.
Okay, great. I think that was it. It looks like for our public comments. So in terms of policy and education business, we had talked a couple of meetings ago, I think, about reviewing some of the MASC recommended policies around COVID. So I would ask the other members of the subcommittee to familiarize yourselves with the boilerplate policies that the MASC has offered so that we can talk about what ones might make sense for us to adopt. So if you need that list again, just let me know and I'll be happy to provide it. So if we can all sort of take a look at those and then come to our next meeting prepared to discuss them, that would be fabulous. Anything else from the subcommittee or from you, Dr. Hackett?
I'm all set on our end.
I'm good, Madam Chair. I want to thank the group for joining us. I think this has been very informational and definitely moving in the right direction as we try to understand how we move forward. So I appreciate everyone taking the time. I know this is adding extra time to the day for everyone, and we really appreciate it.
Agreed.
I'd like to thank the committee as well. I mean, this was the right time to do it, but there's a part of me that wishes we could have had this conversation even earlier. But you know, your willingness to listen and hear the real lived experiences of our professional staff, and you know, your willingness to work with us and think through how we take the best next steps is certainly much appreciated.
Our pleasure. Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Excellent. Do I have a second? Thank you. We'll do a roll call. Mr. Kokoris,
Aye.
Mr. Chafe,
Aye.
and I also vote aye. So we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for
Thank
your
you, everybody.
participation.
Thank you very much.
Good night.